Welcome to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be flying with Craig Hanna. We will get started right at the top of the hour. For those of you just joining us, thank you so much for being here for the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. This is our 41st flight, and we are so excited to have Craig Hanna with us. We will get started right at 12. Welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Here inside the Zeitgeist Creative Studio in Pasadena, California, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists Ryan Harmon and Joe Lancicero and the world's top experienced designers study the past and spend the present envisioning the future of location-based entertainment, or what we like to call UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. Each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set controls for milestone moments in that person's career and attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box and our passenger will answer them after the hour-long journey. Climbing aboard our time machine today is industry icon, past president of the Themed Entertainment Association, and co-founder and principal of Thinkwell Group, now part of Tate, Craig Hanna. From Ski Dubai's Snow Play Zone to London's The Making of Harry Potter to Warner Brothers World and Abu Dhabi, Craig has tapped into his talents as a writer and creative leader and channeled his passion for the innovative arts into theme parks, attractions, exhibits, and nighttime spectaculars that are enjoyed by millions each year all over the world. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer Ryan Harmon, and Zeitgeist Executive Vice President and Chief Art Director Joe Lancicero, along with a man who isn't satisfied with a meal unless he's drenched in sweat, Craig Hanna.
It's true. I've been there.
Hit the button.
Oh my God.
Here we are.
Whoa.
Wow,
That's
wow.
crazy.
Yeah, we just came back from actually reliving one of our episodes from
Yeah.
December 9th of 2022.
2022. It's a bit of a historic time. We have lost our very first passenger, David Dameron. For those of you who know, David was an amazing illustrator, designer, artist. who I had the pleasure of working with for close to 30 years. And sadly got Parkinson's disease about 3 or 4 years ago. Learned to work with artificial intelligence and actually did a piece for us just last year.
Yeah.
And finally succumbed to the disease just about 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
So we're going to dedicate today's show to David Dameron, but let's move on with
On a positive note.
So for those who don't know, Craig Hanna was very influential to my career. When I got laid off from Disney after working with you on Toontown, I was out on the street and I had just published an article in Disney News magazine, and there was a picture of me with long hair and a guy named David Mumford, who's also no longer with us, who co-wrote the article. And I went to the yellow pages and found other theme park design firms and found this company in Marina Del Rey called KBD, Kevin Biles Design. And I called and Craig went on the phone. He's like, Ryan Harmon, I have Disney News. Are you the weird looking one or the guy with the long hair? and that started our friendship. And Craig and I have traveled all over the place. We went to Spain and Disneyland Paris together for the first time. We went to opening of Luxor, I think. We've been to see Pink Floyd and ELO and all these great concerts. So Craig, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for giving me a job back in 1993.
Wow. And for giving the world so many incredible experiences. So let's get started.
Let's get started.
And you started young. We have the time machine in 1968.
68.
And you designed your first theme park.
Yeah, you're 6 and you're designing a giant gumball with a theme park, which is, that sounds awesome, actually. Tell us about that.
It
looked great in a section view because it is, like 4 times the size of the spaceship Earth. It's got roller coasters and stuff inside. It falls apart on sort of the hygienic scale because my idea was you would go over and just grab a piece of the side of the gumball and just start gnawing on it. And to me, that was like that would be great. What an amazing theme park that would be.
I know.
Genius. What flavor was it?
I have no idea, Joe. That's not important right now.
That's pretty cool.
Okay.
So a couple of years later, your family's got this travel trailer. Oh, and tell us about your parents and how they influenced you and all that.
My parents were both very musical. My father was sort of a showman himself, but he was a teacher. And so we would have the summers free. And we had a 17-foot Santa Fe travel trailer, and we would travel all over the country. I think by the time I was 15, I'd been to all 48 states in the continental United States. My dad loved roadside attractions. He loved roller coasters and old amusement parks. And he was just an extremely curious person and taught me to be curious. And, we would go on Haunted Mansion and be like, don't look at what they want you to look at. Look behind you to see how it was done. Look underneath. That'll show you how it's gonna work. Yeah. And that was always the thing that drove me to be interested in this industry.
Wow. That's awesome. So you collected things on your travels and you charged kids in the neighborhood to see them? So you were kind of
like P.T. Barnum. I was a complete shyster. This way to the egress. You just buy souvenirs. You get, fake parchment money in Colonial Williamsburg or a rubber knife at some roadside attraction. And so I laid them all out in the house like a museum and charged admission so kids could go through and see that. So, I've been in the paid attractions business for much longer than my professional career.
Well, one of your best projects, I think, was when you were 12. And we're in 1974 now, and you're somehow pouring concrete.
Someone's backyard
and building a miniature golf course. Like, did you have permission to do that? Or what's going on?
No, it was summer, and so we were left to our own devices. Kids, you just go outside, get out of the house until it's dark. So Ben's parents both worked, and we decided we would make a mini golf course in the backyard. And so we started pouring concrete and making ponds and bridges for the ball to go over. And that night at dinner, my dad got a call and said, "Hey, what are you doing over at Ben's house?" So we're making a miniature golf course. Like, you didn't get permission. His dad just called. You guys are in big trouble, and we had to stop. Never got the charge for the mini golf course.
Oh, that's too bad. And then tell us 3 years later about your amazing Star Wars haunted house walkthrough.
Well, right. We were taking truly the Zeitgeist. 1977, Star Wars came out. It was Halloween. My friend had a big open garage and carport area, and so we did a walk through haunted house. I thought this was a great idea, but it really falls apart if you think about it. Like, you don't have like monsters and lightsabers in the same room. It didn't really make for a great haunted house.
Yeah.
No, that shows.
So that's a good lesson, by the way. Like, choose your concept carefully.
Exactly. And then you made your own Leota head too, which I just saw a guy online who did it in the ball in a sphere, and it gives you all the instructions. But you were doing this in 1977
using your mother's wig form.
Yeah. I didn't know what to project onto, and I was looking for like something head shaped, and then it was the 70s. My mom had a wig, and there was a styrofoam head up in the closet. Like, it's white. It's perfect.
I know.
And took that and Super 8 projector on a loop, and there it was, my first Leota's head for Halloween.
You filmed yourself?
I clamped my head to not move, so I knew it would not go out of alignment.
Right.
And put on some ghoulish makeup and just went, and that was on a loop. And that was out on the porch. Halloween.
Wow. So cool.
So talk a little bit about some of your early jobs too, because all of it kind of helps form you and informs who you become later. And you had some interesting ones.
I had an early love of computers. So, early 80s, got my first computer, and then a friend of mine and my friend ended up inventing the video toaster. If any of you are familiar with old computer peripherals, he was one of the inventors of the video toaster. And he and I started a users group for this computer called the TRS-80 color computer, one of the Radio Shack computers, one of the first, if not the first, maybe before Commodore 64, color computers for home use. And we started a users group that ended up becoming the third largest users group in the country, I believe, after Boston Users Group and Silicon Valley. And we had newsletters and conventions. We had a convention at the Pasadena Convention Center for thousands of people. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just doing it. But suddenly I was in marketing. And then a company that had, because this is all at the same time as all of those home computers were coming out, a competitor that wanted to come out into the market hired us to do what they called aftermarket support, which was, again, a newsletter, a convention, a magazine, software reviews. I had a BBS running in my house with three phone lines coming into the house, so 3 people could be online simultaneously and chat with each other. And we didn't know what we were doing. I didn't know this was innovative at the time. I didn't think it was, but that really got me into the marketing business. And in that marketing business, Joe, to answer your question, I ended up calling a company called Ride and Show Engineering that happened to be in my backyard in San Dimas, California. And they were remodeling or redoing the monorails for Disneyland. I didn't know that companies outside of Disney existed. So when I found out there was this vendor company and this manufacturing company, I'm like, well, maybe I could work there. And so I called the CEO and said, you need to hire me. And that's how I got my foot in the door.
Wow. And he hired you in what capacity?
Well, he didn't need me full time. So he was working on a business plan and said, do you write business plans? And I hope he never watches this because he's going to find out I lied to him, because I said, of course I write business plans. And I went to the library and checked out a book on writing business plans, because for most of you watching, this was pre-internet. This was a long time ago. And read that book cover to cover, went to my meeting and said, let me help you with your business plan. So he hired me freelance And then he had me do something else and do something else and do something else. And finally I said, you're paying me more to work part-time than you would pay if you hired me to work full-time.
Right.
And he was like, interesting, you're hired. And so
Wow.
that's really how it started.
Wow.
Who ran Ride and Show? That wasn't Bob
Uh,
Burr's company, right?
it was a guy named Ed Foyer and a guy named Bill Watkins. And
Oh,
and Joe McHugh was the
oh
CEO.
yeah. I remember. Okay.
Okay. So what were some of the projects you did there?
Well, they were doing lots of big manufacturing projects. The Norway
Yeah.
Pavilion boat ride system at Epcot. They worked on the earthquake ride system for Florida for Universal, Jaws. They did the prototype for Back to the Future.
Wow.
I remember being in
Wow.
the Iwerks facility in Burbank with the dome and the motion base in there looking at test footage years before Back to the Future opened.
Yeah.
Wow.
So you got hired there in marketing, but it's during this period though that you're starting to do creative stuff and starting to develop your creative chops. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to design theme parks like Gumball World or whatever it would have been called.
Yeah.
And that was a really remarkable time in the theme park business because Tokyo Disneyland had just opened. All the Japanese companies had said Tokyo Disneyland was going to be a dismal failure. The Japanese wouldn't like it. They wouldn't go. That's not the real thing. And then, of course, it blew up and was a huge hit.
Yeah.
And pretty soon, every major Japanese company like Mitsubishi and companies like that were coming to firms like Ride and Show and Sequoia Engineering and Landmark Entertainment, the few that were out there at the time, and saying, design us a theme park. And so they ended up hiring a guy named Bob Kurzweil, who had been a show producer at Imagineering and had been the creative show producer on the Norway boat ride. So they knew each other.
Okay.
And so they brought him in, and I walked into his office. I said, teach me everything you know.
Wow.
And instead of saying, get out of my office, he said, okay. And, that was an amazing relationship for me. I learned so much. He taught me about telling stories in cues and what a THRC is and how to tell linear stories and what to focus on and what to throw away in terms of the big idea and visual storytelling. And I just like, oh, give it to me, soak it all up.
Yeah.
And then
I was
pretty soon
fortunate enough.
we were collaborating on doing concepts, and I just was doing creative. No one cared. I just did it.
Just a quick one about Bob. I was fortunate enough during my early years at Imagineering to work with Bob, and he was one of those unsung heroes. Unfortunately, he's no longer with us. Otherwise, we'd have him on the show as well. But same thing, Craig. I mean, I learned so much from him, and he was so generous with giving knowledge, definitely, and one of those unsung heroes. He just did his work, and passed on this knowledge to a lot of people. So I think a lot of us were touched by Bob.
Yeah.
Very humble.
He was quite a guy. Yeah.
So tell us some of the attractions or projects you worked on there that never saw the light of day.
Well, probably my favorite was Battersea Power Plant, which is now open in a huge multi-purpose venue with shopping and residential and hotels. That was going to be an indoor theme park at one point in the early 90s, late 80s.
Yeah.
And the guy that owned Alton Towers was developing it. And he spent, I think, $100 million just trying to pull out all the asbestos and the old turbines and stuff like that, and ran out of money. But we pitched an idea that I think at the time, probably if it got built, would have been the first interactive dark ride, which was sort of a 50s B-movie sci-fi shoot at the aliens ride called Space Cadets, and had really cool laser guns that Bob designed, and that was a lot of fun. Wow. And then for a developer in San Dimas, right next to where Ride and Show was, this guy owned an empty furniture retail building, huge building, and wanted to do an entertainment complex in there. And we had an idea called Nifty 50s, which was you got your own little miniature sort of 1957 Chevy convertible, battery powered, and you would sit in that thing and go to a drive-in dinner have dinner at your car. They'd roller skate out and serve you your food. You would go to a drive-in movie, which would show you 20-minute clips of B movies and things like that. And you could do dark rides, and it would actually latch onto the car and become the ride vehicle, like when you go to the car wash.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of a bad idea. It's a lot like what Wall-E ended up being. You never you're never walking around. You're just sitting in these little cars the
Yeah.
whole time, and not being very healthy. But
Right.
it seemed like a really cool idea at the time.
Yeah.
Those things never saw the light of day.
Yeah, yeah, but again, just great, and you were always thinking out of the box.
Yeah.
I mean, that's such a
Yeah.
that's
Trying.
yeah.
Yeah. So then around 89, I guess, Iwerks formed a company with Ride and Show that they
Yeah,
called
they started
Iwerks.
a joint venture called
Okay.
Iwerks.
Okay.
And that was to create one of the first simulator products out there, because at the time it was really Star Tours and there wasn't much else out there.
Yeah.
ShowScan had a product.
Mm.
There was another company in Toronto that had a product. And then we were developing something called the Turbo Tour Theater, which was essentially moving the seats in an IMAX theater. So the theater didn't move like Star Tours. The theater was stationary and the seats moved. And they were fully self-contained hydraulic units with 2 seats on them. And so I worked for the joint venture then to help figure out what to call them, how to market them, what markets to go after, working with another guy named Les Hill, who was an engineer that came out of Disney and worked on the Indy ride vehicles and things like that. And we were sort of a 2-man product development team at the time. And from that, I ended up just going to work for Iwerks, again in a marketing capacity. But as we were selling these simulator theaters, people would be like, but we want them themed. We want them to have a story. We want to have a reason for it. And so I said, well, I can help with that. I'll write up concepts for that. I'll get some artists to do some sketches or illustrations or whatever. And
Yeah.
then suddenly I wasn't in marketing anymore. I was a creative director.
So you had this drive to become, a theme park designer. And I guess around 91, you met a guy named Kevin Biles Design, Kevin Biles, who had
Yeah.
more of a corporate event company, right?
Yeah.
So
They
how
were
did you
doing
guys-
big product launches and press events and things like that, and had dipped their toe into the theme park business. They did some stuff for Universal, mostly media production, but they thought that was an interesting place to expand. And so they brought me in to lead up a team just to focus on that market. And that was where, Ryan, you and I first
Yeah,
met.
yeah. And that was, we worked in Marina Del Rey. So you were driving from Laverne, the first to Burbank for Iwerks, and then to Marina Del Rey every day.
Yeah. It was the drive was insane. It was like 57 miles each way
Yeah.
through, as anyone who lives in LA knows, the worst possible traffic.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
That job became untenable from the Northridge earthquake, because if
Oh,
you
wow.
may recall, there was one bridge on the 10
Yeah,
that collapsed. It was just a little bridge. It wasn't like
Yeah.
a huge section of freeway.
Yeah.
Closing both directions of the 10. That forced me down to the 105, and
Right.
the traffic just got worse. It became a 2.5 hour
Oh my
commute.
God.
One way.
And so it was just never going to last. I had little kids. It was
Yeah.
terrible.
Wow. So at KBD, we together did an attraction at La Ronde Amusement Park in Canada, all about young Jules Verne, right? And I think we came up with this because Discoveryland had just opened in Paris, right?
Yeah.
92. And I learned a lot about Jules Verne, and Craig and I brainstormed, and we thought, well, maybe Jules Verne came up with all these books he wrote because he was a child, found this thing called L'Optatron, right? Which was like, what do you call the thing that you look through? What were those
Yeah,
things? What was that
the
called?
the stereogram
Yeah, my
or
brain.
something
Yeah,
like that.
But anyway, so Craig got this amazing attraction built, and tell us about the Sarcos figure.
Well, let's just back up for a second.
Okay.
You kind of had the vision for this Jules Verne thing based on the architecture of the building, correct?
Right.
Yeah, the building was left over from the Montreal World's Fair, and it was
Right.
one of the permanent
It was a
pavilions.
Dolphin Stadium.
Yeah, it was a dolphinarium, and it has a spiral copper roof, and it had that great patina that you get from copper after
Yeah.
decades. And just looking at the building, it looked like something out of a Jules Verne story.
Yeah.
And it was that silly roof, just the roof. It was like that should be a Jules Verne thing.
And he's
And
French.
Ryan,
Yeah,
I
they're
don't
in
know.
French Canada.
I don't know if you remember this, but we were going through the bowels of that building before they had taken out all the water and life systems. And there was a tank, sort of a chest high tank.
Yeah.
And we were down in the bowels. No one was around. It was just us. And I was like, I wonder if anything's in here. And this white albino form like jumped out of the water at us. I remember screaming like a little girl and backpedaling out of the way. There was like this albino sturgeon that no one even knew was there, they told me later.
It
Oh,
was
It was creepy as hell.
yeah.
And they finally got rid of all of that, and we built it. That Sarcos figure, Ryan, was for a different attraction. This was
Oh.
a Sally
Oh,
Animations
Sally,
figure
Sally.
that I
Okay.
still think is one of the most beautiful figures they've ever done. And
Oh,
it was sort of this Jules Vernian robot that
yeah.
ran the Optitron when Jules Verne would have been in his trance or whatever, traveling through
Yeah.
time.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But the lesson there, if you want to talk about life lessons and
Yeah.
career lessons and things to learn, is they, meaning the operators of that park, wanted to have a family attraction because
Right.
they were largely an iron ride park.
Right.
And they, when it came time to market the attraction, the marketing people got afraid of marketing it as a family attraction because they're like, that's not our core audience. So I remember showing up before opening and the bus went by and there was an ad for the Optitron and there was like a monster tearing through the screen
Oh
with like
no.
this bloodshot eye. And I was like, that's what is that? That's not even in the movie. And I asked in a panic, like, what's going on? And they said, well, we really want to make sure that the teenagers are going to want to come. I'm like, but that's not what this is. And I
Wow.
remember opening day, people were spitting at the animatronic and booing the show
Oh,
because it was a sweet, wonderful family like
yeah.
Disney style family attraction,
Yeah.
really heartfelt with a beautiful story and a great lesson at the end. And this audience didn't care. And
Oh,
my lesson was you have to make sure that everyone is on board with
yeah.
what it is that you're doing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be a failure. And I think they closed that after about a year.
Oh,
Wow.
that was my first produced
Yeah,
show.
wow.
Oh. Well, we went
Sorry.
on to do, ironically, we did the SeaWorld show, Manatees: The Last Generation at SeaWorld Orlando, which lasted 20 years
Wow.
and was
That's a
voted
better
the
story.
#1 attraction in Orlando by Premier Magazine in 1999. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
another heartfelt, really sweet story. But that was
With an amazing inventor, art director named Tom Hennis.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Obviously, that one was marketed correctly.
yeah. Well, that was SeaWorld. Yeah,
Yeah.
that did well. So let's talk about some of the other cool things we did. We were gonna crash a flying saucer into the Las Vegas Strip,
Yeah.
right? We were gonna turn Harrah's into a boat ride that went through Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn and to New Orleans.
Yeah. Because that was and probably still is a New Orleans themed property.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There were a lot of concepts.
Yeah. That was a
Fortunately,
great time.
not a lot that got built, but a lot of concepts.
Yeah.
Well, and you guys built a couple rides at the MGM Grand Theme Park, right?
Yeah.
And Kevin Biles did something at Luxor too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They
Yeah,
did. They
that
did
was
some
when
media.
Craig and I went to Vegas many times because Vegas was going to be the next family.
Oh, I remember that
destination,
period. Yeah,
right?
the MGM theme park.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was.
mid 90s. So
Yeah.
everything was family.
Yeah.
That didn't last.
Mhm.
So you're working with a really fun guy named Kerry Shavat at KBD, and then
Yeah.
he went over to a very popular, still very successful corporate company called Jack Morton Worldwide.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you joined them, and tell us what happened there.
Well, he basically convinced them, Jack Morton Group, that we could bring this leisure group over. And so we went and started basically in their shop doing what we had been doing before, trying to pitch and produce attractions all over the world. And so we were pitching stuff in Japan, we were pitching stuff in Florida, and there was a great salesperson in our office there who said, "Craig, give me a list of people that you want to work for." And I said, "Oh, well, Universal, Disney. What do you want me to put down?" She said, "Put down what you wanted, who you want."
Wow.
And she was fearless. She just started calling people.
That's
And I
awesome.
remember her coming in saying, I got us a meeting at Universal. We're going to go pitch them our capabilities. And I just was like, how did you do that? She said, "I just called them." And so we went and met with this guy named Phil Hedema. And Phil said, "Yeah, we would love to have you work on some blue sky stuff for us." And so that was a really great opportunity for us. We pitched a whole second gate concept for Universal Hollywood, and an expansion attraction for Islands of Adventure, and three or four other things. And after a couple of years, one day Phil said, "Hey, Craig, do you want a job? You want to come work for Universal?" And I lost my mind. It was like, this is it. This is I'm done now. I can't. This is the pinnacle of my life. I can't do anything more.
Yeah.
And I remember calling my ex-wife. It wasn't my ex at the time.
Right.
On a payphone on Lancashire, because again, didn't have
Right.
mobile
No.
phones,
Right.
and just saying like, this is it. This I've hit the big time.
Right.
Wow.
Wow.
All right. So now you've started this new chapter with Universal Creative, and how did you first start there, and what were some of the things you worked on there?
I was hired to work on a different concept that was supposed to be a second gate for Hollywood that obviously never happened because we're that second gate in Hollywood.
Right.
And ended up feeling like that project wasn't going to go forward. And so I was getting nervous that I was going to be laid off. I had a 2-year contract at the time, but I figured if they don't have work, they're just going to let me go.
Yeah.
And so I started knocking on executives' doors like a complete imbecile and just saying, "What do you need me to do? I'm here to help." And they'd be like, "Oh, Craig, yeah, you're that guy that like you've been to Japan, right? You've been to Europe, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Well, then you can help on this international project." And so I got all these odd projects that they didn't seem to know who else to put on. And so I worked on the initial concepts for all of the non-lift attractions for Osaka for Universal Studios Japan. Worked on a concept for a park in Germany that they were pitching at the time. And then started doing blue sky concepts. I developed the initial concept for Men in Black with Jen Sauer, who was the art director there at the time,
Yeah.
and Twister, which started off as a tram tour idea that you would
Wow.
go by and there would be an actual physical tornado outdoors that would
Wow.
come towards you, and then show action would go and your tram would spin in a circle. And that eventually became a permanent attraction idea in Florida that then got built by another team. So I was just all over the place doing whatever I could because I was afraid any moment I was going to get the axe. And
Wow.
so I just kept like building this portfolio of work and projects. It was just out of self-preservation. I wasn't trying to be like I don't know, like I was just trying to do a bunch of stuff. I was just trying to not get fired.
Right.
And collect frequent flyer miles.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
what
Yeah.
were some of the non-lift attractions at the Osaka park that you worked on? Because I thought that part, I remember I'd worked with Dave Burkhart at Disney, and
Yeah.
he was one of the leads there at that park, and I was working of course on Tokyo Disney, and he invited me down just before the park opened, and I was so impressed with what you guys were doing there. Let's just talk a little bit about that. It is a great park still. I mean, it's evolved into something a little different than where you guys started, but was
Quite a bit different.
things. Yeah.
And to be clear, there was a team that worked on that park that did that were the visionaries behind it. I was just focusing on these 4 original things, which ended up being Woody Woodpecker's animation celebration, which was pretty much from the start going to BRC, we said we want to, take Spirit Lodge and do it with a cartoon character. What would that be?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, Bob wrote and they developed what was a really incredible show.
Amazing show. Yeah.
There was also Movie Magic, which was going to be a movie um, uh, that was going to be a montage of great clips of films, and then at the end, the screen was going to reveal a set that you walked out through that had Spielberg as the host. Then there was going to be a Peanuts area, and at the time, I was developing it as a Peanuts dark ride that was going to go through. If the Peanuts ran a movie studio, what would that be? And it was super cute.
Like your
And
mother.
then that evolved over time into the sort of the play zone that it became. And what was the fourth one? I forgot the fourth one now. I forgot it the other day, and I forgot it now too.
Yeah.
But there were four.
But for Movie Magic, did you use the term Chuck Workman like montage?
Did I say that? I meant to.
No, but you just did. Everybody else
we used to
did.
work together. We always had that, and then we had the Rube Goldberg style,
Right. Or a glockenspiel. There
Yeah,
were
you had to reference
if these
Chuck
terms
Workman.
came up, you had to take a shot, no matter what you were doing. It was a great party game.
Did we come up with the term SIG as well?
Yes.
Together?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
we
SIG?
were designing
Yes.
an exhibit or something, and I don't know if it was Craig or me, but we're like, this can't be boring. Just put shit in glass. You've got to actually have media, lighting. Like nobody wants to just sit there and look at some dead thing in glass.
That acronym never caught on.
No, it never did.
No,
But
but
I
it
think
should.
it should. So I remember Craig, you being kind of in charge of all the new stuff, and we did a Stephen King dark ride, and I worked on a Ferrari World thing there, and so many fun things with that team. And we had a lot of celebrities working with us, right, in the industry. We had John Murdy, we had Joe Zenas, we had who else sat with us? Quite a few people who went on to do some amazing things in this business.
And guys like Eric Heshong and Greg Pro and a lot of amazing folks.
Yeah, that was a great time.
So you were in your travels, you traveled to Spain, you worked on Port Aventura, and you met somebody there that became instrumental in the next phase of your career.
But tell us about that too, because you got to create your first nighttime spectacular.
Well, to me, the really exciting thing was Templo del Fuego, which is basically backdraft in an Indiana Jones Mayan temple. There was also Fiesta Ventura, which was the big lagoon show.
That's what
we had 5 projects. Templo was not part of this initially. Universal bought the park.
Right.
And they wanted to make sure they had their stamp on this park when it was a seasonal park at the time when the park reopened. And so we developed a bunch of concepts on things that could be done quickly, redoing the Western Stunt Show to make it more universal, like adding a lagoon show, retheming the entry land because it was very plain and we wanted to age and grain it and make it feel more authentic. Bunch of stuff like that. And by the time they finally approved the funding to do all of those, we had 103 or 105 days from the time they turned from the time they turned it on until we opened these I think 7 projects. I remember we made team project jackets for everybody, and then we did like merit badges, like like the Boy Scouts for each one of the projects. So everyone wanted to get the 7 projects, but you could only get them if you actually worked on each project. So people would be like, "Can I go hammer this thing on the stunt show for 5 minutes, and then can I get the merit badge?"
Right.
That was crazy. That was crazy. And then Templo del Fuego happened later. But that was fun because we were kind of left to our own devices. There, USJ was being built, and we had a team that really knew what they were doing. And I convinced Universal, like, we need to keep this team together because we're going to want to take those learnings of working in Spain and we don't want them to disperse. We want to keep that team together to do the next one. And so there was a lot of overlapping. We would be finishing a project and then doing concept on the next one and getting the approval. So that happened for about 3 years. And that was just a really fun time.
Yeah, and you were in Barcelona quite a bit.
A lot, yeah, a lot. I had an apartment there at one point, and was flying in and out like once every 6 weeks, I think it was, for a while. It was a blast. We ate and drank so well.
That's why I live half the time in
Yeah,
Spain.
yeah. Joe's got a place in Madrid.
How's your Spanish?
Oh, very bad, very bad.
Un poquito.
See,
And so what happened then? What year are we? We're around, 2001. Wait,
yeah, yeah.
things changed. You were
2001, Universal Creative decided that they were going to relocate everybody to Orlando.
wow.
And I just didn't see for me that was a future that was going to work for me. I had 4 kids; they were all in school. I wanted to stay where the heart of the industry was at the time in Southern California, and so I told them, I said, "I'm sorry, I can't make the move."
Yeah.
And so they said, "All right, well, see ya. Thanks for everything. Bye."
Wow.
And
Ouch.
and I was like, all right, now what? I'm 38.
Wow.
Disney's not hiring because I think Tokyo Disney Sea opened what year, Joe? What year would have that been?
2001.
2001. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. And California Adventure opened,
right.
and they were downsizing quite a bit. Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, what am I going to do? I'm screwed. No one's going to hire me, and so decided to start Thinkwell with a couple of guys that I had been working with on attractions at Universal, and pretty soon we were, in a little office over the Pasadena Playhouse, and we did our product or our company announcement press release on September 10th, 2001.
Oh.
And needless to say, it did not get picked up by anyone the next day.
Bad timing.
Yeah.
And at IAPA that year, I remember Keith James saying to me, "What are you guys doing? How are you pivoting? What are you guys going to do?" And I said, "Look, we don't have any clients, so everything is upside for us.
Right.
We're not having to lay off or rethink our operating plan or anything, because we're just struggling to make it,
So how did you come up with the name Thinkwell?
It's a really long story.
Okay.
But the short version is,
okay.
I had this idea for a logo that was an inkwell spilled over, but the splotch that came out was either going to be a brain or a light bulb. I couldn't decide which was going to be better. And I had the logo, but not the name.
Right.
And somebody who has to remain nameless said to me, "Well, it would be much better if you just called it Thinkwell, not Inkwell, because it's sort of a play on words."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh my God, that's so good."
Yeah.
But it was, I would love to say, "Oh yeah, I did it." But somebody who had nothing to do with the company said to me, somebody from our industry said to me that you should call it this. And so that stuck.
Yeah.
And then we started having clients going, "Oh, your name is really smart. Like, that's just so thoughtful." And I was like, wow, I didn't know. I didn't know how that we stumbled onto something so great.
Yeah.
Wow.
Super cool. So Thinkwell goes on to basically become the biggest design firm in the industry at a time where there were quite a few. There was Landmark still, there was BRC, there was Jack Rouse, there was iTech. Hadam also left and formed a company. Strangely, you had worked together for years, and now you're kind of competitors. So what was the landscape like, and how did you become like the biggest and the best?
Well, the funny thing is, when we started, we always said we would always be a boutique firm and never have more than 12 employees. One of us, I don't remember if it was Francois or Joe or me, one of us read a management book that said, like, the internal politics of a business changes at like 12, 99, and 200. Don't quote me on these numbers, but there was, I knew the 12. For sure, but the other numbers, and we're like, "Oh well, we don't want that. That sounds awful. We'll just be 12," and that kind of fell by the wayside pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I think one of the big things was we looked at the cycle of hirings and firings and ups and downs and project-based business, and we said we need to diversify, and that diversification will help us spread out the problem over multiple projects in multiple industries, and hopefully that will level set a little bit. So we got into the museum business and fortunately met a guy named Peter Van Roden at Sesame Workshop who licensed us Sesame Street to create a touring children's based educational museum exhibit. We ended up getting into corporate and doing stuff for Nike. We ended up getting into live and doing like the Batman stunt show at Warner Brothers World in Madrid. And that diversification really helped stabilize our business and really helped reduce that up and down cycle risk. And that's what kept us sustained over
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
No.
Wow.
So what one of your first big claims to fame and kind of really put you on the map was that I always thought I never got to go, some of my team members did, was the Ski Dubai.
Oh, yeah.
Ski Dubai is just one of those galvanizing ideas, like snow in the desert.
That's
And no matter where I
right.
went,
Yeah.
if I could be on a plane anywhere, and if somebody said, "What do you do?" and I would mention Ski Dubai, they've heard of it. Everyone's heard of Ski Dubai.
Yeah.
And so, no one had done a children's play area in an indoor snow park before.
Right,
We were
right.
going to vendors and saying, "Well, how long will this last in this environment?" They said, "We don't know. There's never been anything in this environment before." And so we were innovating a bunch of stuff. We had a bunch of concepts, many of which got built and tossed really, really fast because they just didn't work. And the operator was like, "Well, that was a nice try. Let's do the next one." I was like, kids are going to make snowballs. They're going to throw snowballs at each other and hurt each other. So let's make a snowball shooting gallery, and let's have targets that are moving that you can throw the snowball at. And you're going to make them anyway. So let's throw them at a target.
Right.
And that got built, but then the thing rusted and it really didn't work very well. And so they tore that out. And we also found out, by the way, that the manufactured snow didn't really pack well into a snowball. I had this other great idea for kid curling. So there was an ice area, and you would put your kid, like toddlers. We needed toddler stuff. Put your toddler on basically whatever those stone curling balls are, and you'd push your kid across the ice and they'd go sliding over. But that they were getting hurt, and so they covered over that with snow and just said, "We don't have that. What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
But no one had done it before, so it became a great lab to learn.
Fantastic.
And
Wow.
we ended up doing Ski Abu Dhabi and Ski Egypt and Ski Saudi, and we became like the ski guys. It was very, very strange.
Yeah.
Who knew?
Right.
Wow.
Wow, that's
Wow.
cool. I remember having lunch with you somewhere around this time and you telling me things had gotten so big you didn't even know who was working for you.
Yeah.
Somebody come up to you and said hi, and you're like, "Who are you?"
It was that was weird. That was a
Yeah.
weird
So much
time,
for the
sure.
12 person boutique company.
Yeah.
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 Well, I mean, in 2008, we had over 200 people, most of them working on Warner Brothers World Abu Dhabi, and because of the economic crash, the project got put on hold. We had to lay 200 people off, which was like one of the worst moments of my adult life,
Yeah.
because these were people that I loved and cared about, and I knew they had families. I felt like when I had started at Universal, thinking I was going to lose my job,
Yeah.
what this must be like for them.
Yeah.
We threw I mean, it seems superficial, but we threw a taco party for everybody because it's like the least we can do is celebrate what you guys have created and what you've done. And years later, I think on our 15th anniversary, we invited every former employee back for a party, and people were like, sort of like the nicest thing and the most amazingly human thing you guys did was do this taco party, which could have gone one of two ways. Either people would have been pissed because like you gave me a taco party,
Right.
but I think we have always been very from the heart about and very open with everyone at the company. I see Mike Libby's on here; he can attest to. I think we just tried to be human and honest to people, and always tried to strive to do what we thought was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure that played a lot into why you guys were successful too.
Yeah.
I mean, it worked. People sense that.
Yeah. Yeah, so tell us, one of the best things I've ever seen in London is the making of Harry Potter attraction. I've been there twice and I could spend all day there. But tell us how you guys got that gig and how you took Harry Potter as a film and turned it into an amazing experience.
Well, we had worked, I think I mentioned the Batman stunt show,
Right.
and it was an impossible project. And we were going to say no to it. We were going to tell them there's no way to get this done successfully in time. And um, they kind of just said please. And we said, well, let's go ahead and do it. It's going to be a risk. We'll acknowledge the risk. Hopefully the client acknowledges the risk. And we did the stunt show. It was a great success. And because that worked, and because we stuck our necks out for them,
Right.
when the opportunity for Potter came up, the internal person, a guy named Bob Whitecamp, who also unfortunately is no longer with
Yeah.
us, recommended us to the stakeholder for the Potter project. And then we went on a trip during the production of the sixth or seventh film over to Leavesden. Saw they kept everything because, as you know, they were making the movies while J.K. Rowling was still writing the books. So,
Right.
unlike
Wow.
typical film production, where when you don't build the set to last longer than the shot, they're like, well, we don't know if we're going to need this set again in three more books. So they kept everything and they
Wow.
built it. They built it to last. And
Wow.
so there were 100 shipping containers of just sets, props, and
Oh,
costumes, let
Oh my
alone
gosh.
empty warehouses full of all the sets and stuff.
wow.
And so we left and wrote, I think, an assessment of 5, 6 different ideas of what you could do: a touring show, a permanent museum exhibit in, at a famous facility, this or that. And one of the things we pitched was a studio attraction at Leavesden, and that ended up being the thing that they did. And I think for us, the really unique opportunity was, normally, as you guys know, you finish a project, you hand over the keys, and you say good luck,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you go to the next thing. And with Warner Brothers Movie World, or Warner Brothers Studio Tour, sorry, they said, well, we want you guys to stay involved. We want you to be basically show quality standards, keep us
Wow.
honest, help
Wow.
us out with ideas for events and the next thing. And so we stayed with them. And then they said, we need an expansion. This is a huge success. What should we do? And we said, well, let's add platform 9 3/4. And then again, something a couple years later, we need to make news again. Well, let's add Forbidden Forest. And then let's add um, Gringotts. And at that point, the thing had grown so large, we had to build a whole new lobby and a whole new arrival experience just for the dwell capacity, and
Wow.
double the
Wow.
size of the retail. And so it was huge.
Wow.
And so that was a project that up until I retired in December, we I had continued to work on since 2007,
Wow.
which,
Wow.
you build amazing personal relationships. We
Yeah.
worked with all the filmmakers across the board to keep it as authentic and genuine as possible. So
Mhm.
I made friends with Stuart Craig, the art director. There
Wow.
were people that, I get Christmas cards from. And then we ended up doing the studio tour in Tokyo, which was
Wow.
the same but different,
Yeah.
because it's a different audience. We knew it needed to be more updated for technology and interactivity.
Yeah.
And so it ended up being like, let's take the best of that, but what else could we do that would be cool and different and unique? And
Right.
it just became a whole new and interesting challenge again. And
Wow.
now, I don't know if you saw the other day, but they announced Shanghai. So
Yeah.
there's going to be another one in Shanghai, and Tate's
Wow.
hard at work. Well, I can't say that. I can't say that.
Are there
Oh, you didn't say it.
are there
We
enough
heard.
original sets and props and stuff for all of these, or do they replicate the original?
A little of both. There's still stuff in the archives to be done,
Yeah.
to be used.
100
But
containers, I
Yeah,
would
that's a
guess.
lot.
Yeah.
yeah, but also they would always go back to the filmmakers and have them recreate their work, because there were sets that would have been torn down either
Right.
on purpose or by accident, and then for another film would have to be built again. So
Right.
this is just very, very normal process. And
Wow.
Right.
um, it's just been such a huge attraction in the London area.
Yeah. So after this, I in the mid-90s, I was director of show development for Warner Brothers.
Oh.
And we had a department called Recreation Enterprises, and we did a park they did one in Australia, then Germany, then Spain, which is where your Batman show was. And
Yeah.
then that group went away. And I guess it turned into more of a licensing thing. Warner did not want to own theme parks anymore, right? So I guess Morale came around and licensed the Warner name, and you guys got to build an entire indoor theme park.
I've never been,
Yeah.
but it looks
Yeah, it looks
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah,
Tell us about
Thank you.
that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think the really unique thing for us was to not only design it, but to be there for the build, to produce every ride, show, and attraction,
Wow.
every piece of media,
Wow.
and run around through with a skeleton crew of amazing, talented people that
Yep.
you just end up falling in love with because you're in the trenches together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we all just worked really, really hard to make this really, really incredible, immersive, because it's indoors, park. And
Yeah.
I'm super proud of the work we did there. I spent 5 months in Abu Dhabi at the end, getting it open and being there for the client to make sure that they knew that we were serious, that this project was our most important project.
Yeah.
And at the time, I told my partners, look, this may be my own personal chance, my one-time chance to see an entire park all the way through to opening day.
Yeah.
So Dave Cobb and I were on radios running around the attractions, buying off on stuff and programming. And yeah, and now here I am retired. It was the one time in my
Yeah.
life that I
Yeah.
was going to see an entire
Yeah.
theme park all the way
Right.
through.
Yeah.
Right.
And there's only a handful of people in the industry
Yeah.
that have had that experience, you know, of
Tony
actually,
Baxter, Joe Rody,
yeah,
Craig Hanna.
yeah, you know, to actually oversee
Yeah.
an entire park.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's
awesome.
great.
So I don't know chronologically if we messed up, but around 2006, you had another amazing project that you also told the other guys, I'm out of here, I'm focused on this, and that was the Universal 360 show. So tell
Yeah,
us about
yeah.
that one too.
Universal 360 was the first real nighttime spectacular in the lagoon at Universal Studios Florida, and now that we've ended up working on, we being Thinkwell / Tate, have ended up working on 5 or 6 different variations now, and the latest stuff that Jason McManus is the leader on with Thinkwell Media team have done amazing stuff since. But at the time, Universal had a barge and an inflatable sphere. And I remember we have this new technology. They said they're called high definition projectors. And we're going to project the same image on 2 sides of the sphere. So no matter where you are, you can see the image. And we don't want to do like a great clips show of the greatest moments of Universal movies with some pyro and some fireworks. But because the lagoon isn't a show lagoon, there's no single place to stand and watch. It's got to work from everywhere. So we were innovating really some of the first map projection, because we're going to use the attraction buildings as surfaces to project in the background.
Yeah.
We were doing stuff with pyro and lasers and the media, and a guy named Michael Caroni, Ryan and I know really, really well, I've worked with a lot, is probably next to Chuck Workman, the greatest Supercuts editor, media guy ever.
Yeah.
He ended up doing this really, really amazing show with us following the hero's journey. And for me, it's still one of my favorite attractions because we took some creative risks and it paid off. And that nothing more magical in your career than to sort of feel like you're really taking a risk and having it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's, I mean, thinking back on all we've been talking about, it's kind of a thread through your career, Craig. You know, doing a snowball shooting gallery. I mean, all that stuff was, you know, thinking outside the box, taking risks, you know, and, you know, in our industry, and I think probably we're seeing less of it. I hope not, but, you know, because, you know, the high risk comes with, you know, concern by the operators and by the guys with the purses, you know, it can go south, and, you know, but those are always the things that people remember and people talk about. You know?
Now, is it true they brought in a famous movie director to help with this show?
Yeah, John Landis was brought in as the creative consultant
Oh, was there a
for the
helicopter
show.
moment in the show?
No, we
Oh,
don't.
oh,
No one talks about that.
okay.
And he came out to Thinkwell, and we had a charrette, and there was a video crew that were filming all of this, and that was an interesting, challenging
Yeah.
Was he still
experience.
wearing his famous tie and jacket?
Yes,
Oh,
yes,
wow.
absolutely. But I got to back up though. Joe,
Sure.
you said, Craig, you took risks and stuff.
Yeah.
But I have to stop and say I stand on the shoulders of giants,
Yeah.
because whether it was Francois Bergeron or Joe Zenas, my partners at Thinkwell, or literally the hundreds of people who worked at Thinkwell for years,
Yeah.
those were the people that were making me look good. Somebody always has said over the years, you hire people that are better than you.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of people actually do, because they're fearful
Mhm.
of the people being better than them.
Mhm.
And I think you just have to throw away that fear
Yeah.
and say, like, you have to surround yourself with people smarter than you, because that's the only way that you are going to improve.
Right.
And no matter who it was that came in that did amazing work, I was always in awe of their work,
Yeah.
and always supported what they did to make sure it was better, and made sure the collaboration worked. I loved the collaborative process.
Yeah.
It's one of the only collaborative arts out there. I mean, you can argue theater and film and TV are, but those are still very much director vision driven by a person.
Mhm.
And the thing I loved about the theme park business, or the experience design business, is I could come up with an idea that I thought was the perfect idea, was 100%.
Yeah.
And then a lighting designer would say, well, if you did this, you could then
Right.
make that, and that would be pretty cool. And so this thing that I thought was 100% would get 110%. By the
Yeah.
way, I hate it when people say I'm giving 110%. There's no such thing. It's only 100%. So I'm even screwing myself by saying this right now. And then a sound designer would come along and say, like, if you did point source around the room, it would sound like mosquitoes were buzzing all the way around you. Like,
Right.
wow, that's amazing. I never would have thought of that. But you have to be open to that
Yeah.
in the collaborative environment, to
Yeah.
allow those ideas
Yeah.
to come up, that they can feel safe to have those ideas,
Mhm.
and then to then nurture those ideas into making that thing better. And that to me was what I got off on in the business,
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
that right there.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, me too. And I couldn't agree more. I think, theme park, you know, is without a doubt the most collaborative, even because I came from film, I did some theater, and that's kind of a box that you always work, a film, there's one way to make a film.
Mm.
You can stretch the technical parameters a little bit. A theater's, got a proscenium, you can again stretch the parameters a little bit on that. But theme parks, it's like every attraction was a new way to present something, or you could have the potential of a new way to
Yeah.
present something. And getting back to taking risks, you always had to, think about, the different ways that people were going to experience it. Was it a ride? Is a show, whatever. And the only way you get it done was exactly what you said, Craig, having the smartest people in there together that shared the vision for it.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of really great stuff out there. There's not some not so great stuff, but I think
Yeah.
the really great stuff, and you were author to many of it, came out of that collaborative spirit,
Yeah.
getting the
Yeah,
Yeah. So let's
for
move
sure.
to 2017, and it seems like Joe Zenas is having a talk with a guy named Adam about, you guys are thinking it's time to maybe move on from Thinkwell.
Well, I don't know exactly when our relationship with Tate began. We always had a lot of mutual respect. And
Okay.
I remember Adam Davis coming out. Well, I actually don't remember. That's a total lie.
Oh.
Joe had Adam come through and toured him around Thinkwell. He thought what we did was amazing. And then flash forward during the pandemic, we being Francois and Joe and I were talking about what's the next stage for us?
Yeah.
What does our retirement someday look like? And what are we going to do? And so we were looking for investors, and one thing led to another, and in 2022, that's really smart. In 2022,
Yeah.
Tate purchased Thinkwell, and
Wow.
Tate's an amazing company. They have huge, amazing manufacturing and coding capability. A lot of people don't know that their coding and control systems are off the charts. Obviously, they're known for rock and roll and doing everything from Rolling Stones to Taylor Swift,
Yeah.
but also do a lot of corporate production and a lot of attraction stuff. And so we brought the front end of the process. They were the back end of the process.
Right.
And so by bringing us into the front end, that all I said, you need to have a seat at the table in
Yeah.
order to get, as much of the pie as you can. And
Right.
so this just brought the capability to get Tate at the table a lot sooner to the process. And so it just was a very logical fit. And a long time ago, we had some people that had been sniffing our butts. Can I say that? And they said you have to do the Napa Valley test. And we said, what's the Napa Valley test?
Yeah.
They said, if you were willing to spend a weekend with this partner in Napa Valley and come out of it happy, then they're probably a good partner. And Tate absolutely would have totally passed the Napa Valley test. So it just became a very logical thing for us, and it just was great.
Yeah.
Is great.
But after building the Thinkwell name and gaining so much respect over decades, I was just a little surprised that they folded it into Tate and the Thinkwell name doesn't exist anymore.
So here's the thing. It became a really complicated story to tell because they also bought iTech. They bought a corporate production company called
Oh, wow.
Production Glue in New York. And as you try to create a great little downtown for the local community. And so those are my hobby projects. My real project is I've put off for 35 years writing for me. And so I'm working on novels, and I write a column for the local paper to compare and contrast my life from LA to the farm,
Okay.
That's
called
fun. That sounds
called
great.
Farm Life. And
Yeah.
so it's getting back to what I love to do, which is writing, and really writing for me, which is what I'm really passionate about.
Wow.
That's great.
So when can we expect the first novel?
Well, I've been really, really busy on this little town project. And aside from outlining the first of 3 books in a trilogy, I haven't really had much time. It's only been 2 months, so give me a break.
I give him a break.
I also went on a 3-week vacation in January, so cut me some slack.
Okay.
But I would say in about 2 years, the first book should be ready. I've got agents, as you might imagine, from our connections in Hollywood and with agencies and things. People are ready, and just said, bring me the book. We'll get it done.
That's great.
And do you think you'll do a Bob Weiss and write a story of your life and career as well?
No one wants to hear the story of my life. Right?
Well, they just did.
Yeah,
they just did. Here we go.
There
we go.
Okay.
It may be fun for an hour, but if you had to sit down and slog through a whole book, I'll bet it would be pretty boring.
Well, I listened to Bob's audio book on my way to Vegas, like 4.5 hours. And when I got there were 11 hours left.
Oh,
Leave them wanting more.
yeah, that's
right.
Great showman. Do that.
No disrespect, Bob. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
Anyway, at the end of every flight, Joe and I like to ask our illustrious guests the one burning question, and that is what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless? And we are anxious to hear what you think.
Timely, timeless.
Timely yet timeless.
Well, first of all, I fully believe in Mickey's 10 Commandments and have them up on the wall and force everybody that ever worked for me to understand them. So telling one story at a time, ounce of treatment. And know that the resulting thing is going to be much better without those limbs of that tree to make it a beautiful bonsai.
Yeah.
That's just a terrible metaphor. And I think it's absolutely true. You have to maintain laser focus on what the idea is and make sure that everything is working together to communicate that idea, and keep it simple, stupid. We are telling stories in a linear fashion. I have in a presentation an upside down pyramid of narrative story, and it goes from novels at the top, where you can build billion-dollar sets and take as long as you want to think about what's in one character's mind for chapters at a time. And then it goes to theater and movies and da da da. And at the bottom
Yeah.
is themed attractions.
Right.
Because we have to do in such a thimbleful of story to communicate clearly to people. And I love that challenge. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
But just keep it simple, focus on your thing, and make sure there's nothing extraneous to that thing, to make sure it's always communicating that one thing back to the audience, and it'll be timeless.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Well, with that, Joe,
Thank you very much.
Craig, thank you so much for flying with us today. Everybody stick around. There's going to be a Q&A with Craig, but where should we go?
Geez.
Why don't we go see one of
I want to go to Warner Brothers Movie World.
We can do that. Go back just a few years.
Okay,
All right.
let's do that.
All right, everybody. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Craig.
See everybody soon.
Great time. Thank
Okay,
you. Bye.
bye-bye.
Oh my goodness. Let's see. All right, Craig, thank you so much for joining us today. We hoped you all enjoyed the flight. And we can't thank our friend Craig Hanna enough for time traveling with us. If you have questions for Craig, please stick around for our live Q&A in just 60 seconds. And on behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending your time with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out all 40 of our time travel adventures on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. And they're also available as podcasts wherever you listen. Please tell your friends. Keep an eye out on our socials over the next couple weeks as we announce our March passenger, and also plan now to join us in May for our rescheduled flight with former president of Walt Disney Imagineering, Bob Weiss.
Get it.